The crowd in the Red Keep's courtyard had never been more still. When Ser Gregor Clegane roared for the last time, his voice echoing across the marble walls, it wasn't pain or fear, it was rage. But that rage died with him. Oberyn Martell stood tall, blood splattered across his chest, the broken haft of his spear still buried in the mountain's chest. The audience was silent, stunned. Even Tyrion Lannister, kneeling and awaiting his fate, stared in disbelief. The Viper had done the impossible. He had killed the mountain, but he wasn't done. "I will have justice," Oberyn roared, his voice raw, echoing louder than any bell. "You raped her, you murdered her, you killed her children." He spat the words like venom. Tywin Lannister stood up, his composure already cracking. This wasn't part of the plan. He had underestimated the Viper. He always had. But Dorne did not forget, and Oberyn Martell did not forgive. Instead of quietly leaving the capital after winning the trial by combat, Oberyn stayed. For 3 days he remained in the Tower of the Hand, nursing his wounds, meeting with envoys from Dorne, and watching. He knew Cersei was terrified. He saw the way Jaime Lannister avoided eye contact. Tyrion had been pardoned, publicly, but Oberyn didn't trust the Lannisters to keep their word without leverage. That leverage came in the form of Rhaenys and Aegon. Rumors had been swirling for years that Aegon Targaryen had survived the sack of King's Landing. Oberyn had long dismissed them as fantasy, until Varys himself knocked on his chamber door. "I have what you seek, my prince," Varys whispered, gliding into the room like a shadow. "A living dragon. Or close enough." Oberyn didn't blink. "Then it's time the lion learned what it means to be hunted." Dorne's armies began to move within the week. The Martells didn't march for honor, or even for politics. They marched for Elia. The banners of the Sun and Spear were seen in Highgarden, then Maidenpool. Word traveled fast, and fear traveled faster. Cersei sent ravens, dozens. She demanded answers. She offered peace. She even offered to name Dorne her eternal ally. Oberyn sent back one word: no. Meanwhile, Tyrion, now freed but disillusioned, made a quiet exit from King's Landing. He joined Oberyn's camp, not out of loyalty, but because he knew the Lannisters were crumbling, and he hated being on the losing side. As the Dornish host reached the Blackwater, the people of King's Landing looked out from the city walls in panic. No one had ever imagined the capital under siege by dawn, but the impossible had already happened. The mountain had fallen. Within the city, Cersei paced the floors of the Red Keep, drinking more than thinking. Jaime begged her to surrender, but pride is louder than wisdom, and Cersei's pride roared. Oberyn gave her a chance. "A single raven with a message. Give me the head of Tywin Lannister and your children will live." Cersei tore the message to shreds. "He will never have it," she hissed. "Never." But in the dark halls of the keep, someone else was, already deciding otherwise. Kevan Lannister had no intention of dying in a war he hadn't started, and Varys, ever the spider, was spinning one last web. The gates opened on the 4th day of siege, not to surrender, but to invite the Viper. And the people didn't fight, the guards didn't resist. Tywin Lannister was found in his solar, already dead, a Dornish spear through his chest. No one ever confessed to letting them in, but the message was clear: King's Landing belonged to the Viper now. Oberyn didn't sit on the Iron Throne. Not yet. He simply stood in the throne room gazing at it, the screams of Elia echoing in his mind. "This is not justice," he murmured almost to himself, "but it is the beginning." And outside, under the Dornish banners, the people of the capital watched a new chapter begin, one written in vengeance, blood and fire. The Red Keep had never felt colder, despite the blazing summer sun beyond its stained glass windows. The Iron Throne loomed sharp and jagged, but Oberyn didn't approach it. He circled it slowly, his boots tapping against the stone floor with deliberate rhythm. Behind him, his bannermen stood silently, his daughters, the sand snakes, fanned out across the chamber like shadows in a church. "You have what you wanted," said Varys from the shadows. "The mountain is dead. Tywin is dead. What now, Prince Oberyn?" Oberyn paused at the edge of the dais. "Justice is not a moment. Spider, it's a storm, and this is only the first strike. The city was eerily quiet. No bells, no crowds cheering or rebelling, just silence and tension. The common folk didn't know whether to kneel or run. A Dornish army had walked through their gates and taken the capital without a single battle. That kind of power terrified people more than dragons. Jaime Lannister, one-handed and exhausted, met with Oberyn the next morning in the small council chamber. "What are you planning to do with my sister?" Oberyn leaned back in the chair Tywin once ruled from. "She ordered the murder of my kin, lied to the realm, protected that monster you called a brother." "I didn't protect Gregor," Jaime snapped, "and you've already killed him." "And yet I still wake up to the sound of Elia's screams in my head," Oberyn whispered, tapping his fingers on the table. "You think I came here for a single kill? No, Kingslayer. I came to tear out the rot from its roots." Jaime's face darkened. "So it's vengeance you want, not justice." Oberyn's laugh was dry. "Don't you know by now? In this Haziti, they're the same thing." Meanwhile, Cersei had locked herself in Maegor's holdfast with her children. Tommen cried every night. Myrcella, part Dornish, ironically, refused to speak, and Joffrey's ghost still lingered in every shadow. The Queen Regent was unraveling. Olenna Tyrell sent an envoy. She was no fool. With Tywin dead and Cersei cornered, she saw opportunity. Her message was simple. Dorne and the Reach could rule together. Oberyn listened, but he didn't trust her. Not yet. It was Tyrion who found the Queen. Not with soldiers, not with threats, but with wine. He entered Maegor's holdfast unarmed, a flagon in hand, and walked through the hallways like a man returning to a childhood home full of ghosts. "You should have left when you had the chance," Cersei said, her voice hoarse. "And miss this lovely reunion?" Tyrion took a long sip. "You've lost, sister. The only question now is how loudly you want to scream on the way down." She laughed, but it was the sound of a woman broken. "You think Oberyn's going to make a better king? He's a killer, a whore, and a snake." Tyrion didn't argue. "Yes, but he's not you, and that's all the realm needs right now." Later that night, as the fires of the capital flickered under the crimson sky, Oberyn Martell gathered the great house's remaining envoys in the throne room, no crown on his head, no sword in hand. "I don't want your thrones," he said, his voice low but firm. "But I will make sure the wolves never return to this city again. I will cleanse it with Dornish fire if I have to. No more secrets, no more lions roaring in the shadows." Then he turned to Jaime. "Bring me your sister alive, or I swear to the gods I'll let the sand snakes choose their own justice." Jaime didn't answer right away. He looked at the Iron Throne, then at his golden hand, then finally at Oberyn. "You want her alive?" he said quietly. "Then you better pray she hasn't already chosen death." And with that, the vipers. Storm continued to spread. One secret, one betrayal, one blood-stained choice at a time. 3 days passed, and still no one had seen Cersei Lannister. The Red Keep's servants whispered about screams echoing through the stone halls at night, of shattered glass and broken furniture, of Queen Cersei pacing her chambers barefoot, muttering Elia's name like a curse and a prayer. Jaime stood at her door again, this time alone, his golden hand resting against the cold wood. "Open it, Cersei," he said. "They won't wait much longer, neither will I." From behind the door came her voice, hoarse, bitter. "You brought them here, you brought him here. I tried to stop this." "No," she hissed. "You tried to survive it. The door opened just a crack." Her eyes met his, sunken, wild. Cersei Lannister no longer looked like a queen. She looked like a ghost clinging to a throne that had already moved on. Inside the chamber, Tommen lay asleep in a corner, clutching a lion plush. Myrcella stared out the window, unmoving. Cersei stepped forward, barefoot, hair tangled. "He wants to kill me, you know that." Jaime sighed. "He said alive. He said bring you alive, Cersei. That's mercy. Take it." She shook her head slowly. "No. I will not be paraded through the streets for the Viper's revenge. You think this is about you," he snapped suddenly. "This was never about you. This was about Elia, about what you helped cover. He's burning the kingdom not for power, but because you spat on justice for a generation. And now the flames are here." She stared at him, stunned. Then, without another word, She walked back into the chamber. Jaime followed, but only for a moment. Cersei walked to a drawer and opened it. Inside was a small vial, its liquid the color of nightshade. "Cersei," he said, eyes widening. But she didn't drink it. Not yet. She held it like a coin waiting to be tossed. "I want to look him in the eye," she whispered. "I want him to see what he's destroyed, and then I'll decide." Later that day in the throne room, Oberyn waited. The doors opened. Silence followed. Cersei Lannister entered in a plain black dress, barefoot, no crown, no jewels. "The people," gasped. She looked like a ghost, but she walked with a queen's pride, head high, chin raised. Jaime followed behind, face unreadable. Oberyn stepped down from the dais. The room tensed. "Well," he said softly, circling her like prey. "Here she is, the lioness in a cage." Cersei didn't flinch. "Say what you want, do what you will, but don't pretend this is justice. This is your ego in a costume." Oberyn's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Justice doesn't always come with trumpets. Sometimes it comes with silence. And you'll find that I can be very silent when I choose to be." He turned to the gathered lords and ladies. "Cersei Lannister is no longer Queen Regent. She is no longer a ruler of any kind. She will be held in the dungeons, beneath the Red Keep, until further judgment is passed. She may live, if the people she wronged deem her worthy." Cersei didn't struggle, didn't shout. As the guards moved to take her, she simply muttered something under her breath. Only Jaime heard it. "I should have burned this place to the ground." That night, a storm hit King's Landing. Rain lashed the rooftops like whips. In the Tower of the Hand, Tyrion drank quietly, watching the water drip from the balcony. He was tired. Oberyn entered, his boots soaked, face solemn. "It's done," he said. "Is it?" Tyrion asked, not turning. "You've caged her, dethroned her. But every Lannister has a long shadow, especially the dead ones." Oberyn didn't reply at first. Then he spoke, voice low. "Her son still breathes. Her brother still watches. This isn't over. But we've changed the story's course." Tyrion finally looked at him. "Then let's hope your story doesn't end like all the others in this city, screaming and soaked in blood." Oberyn nodded. Outside, the storm grew louder. Inside, so did the storm still brewing. Whispers of rebellion, shadows of dragons, and the long, quiet threat of vengeance unfinished. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. King's Landing was drenched in grey, rooftops soaked, alleys flooded, and the skies heavy with thunder like drums of war. But inside the walls of the Red Keep, it wasn't the weather that unsettled people. It was the silence that followed Cersei Lannister's fall. Oberyn Martell sat alone in the small council chamber. The seats once filled by schemers and warmongers now sat vacant or held by strangers. Lord Varys, the ever-watchful spider, remained, his whispers flowing like wine. Tyrion lingered, but with the weariness of a man expecting betrayal behind every door. The rest either fled, bent the knee, or vanished into the shadows of a city that never truly forgave. The Martell banners still flew over the gates, but already whispers stirred. Some called Oberyn a liberator, others a conqueror in disguise. But no one said it to his face, no one dared. He stared at the table where Tywin once commanded wars with a glance. Now it was his, and yet the satisfaction was shallow. Ellia's laughter still haunted him in sleep, and in the mirror he saw not justice, but a man who'd tasted blood and didn't know when to stop. Then came the raven from Sunspear. His brother, Doran Martell, the Prince of Dorne, had sent word. "Return. The fire you lit here is spreading." Too fast. But Oberyn had no plans to return. Not yet. Instead, he met with Tyrion on the Tower of the Hand's balcony, wine in hand, the smell of wet stone in the air. "You're not a ruler," Tyrion said bluntly, sipping from his cup. "You're a blade with a crown." "I didn't take the crown," Oberyn replied. "I left it right where it was, untouched." "And that's the problem," Tyrion muttered. "In this city, when the throne's empty, someone worse always fills it." Oberyn didn't respond. Below them the city flickered with life. Merchants reopened their stalls. Septons tried to calm the frightened, but beneath it all, something darker festered. The nobles were regrouping. Some had begun speaking Cersei's name again, not in pity but in conspiracy. Even the faith had begun murmuring about foreign corruption. That night, a fire broke out in Flea Bottom, then another in the Shadow Market. Oberyn sent patrols, but they were met with stone and arrows. The city was rising, not for Cersei, not even against Oberyn, but because chaos was all it had left, and chaos had no allegiance. The next morning, a body was found hung from the walls of the Red Keep. One of the sand snakes, Oberyn, strangled, eyes gouged out, a message carved into her chest. Justice is a lie. Oberyn didn't speak for a full hour. He just stood there, his hand trembling as he looked at her. Tyrion found him in the gardens later. "This city doesn't want justice," he said carefully. "It wants kings, it wants fear. It wants someone to hate more than itself." Oberyn turned to him slowly. "Then let them hate. Let them fear. I will give them a king to remember." "You mean to take the throne?" Tyrion asked, almost laughing. "You, the viper who wouldn't kneel." "I came to kill a mountain," Oberyn said coldly, "but now I see the mountain was never the only monster. The whole kingdom is made of them, and if it takes a monster to rule them, so be it." By sunset, the throne room was lit with torchlight. Oberyn Martell stepped forward, the Iron Throne still untouched, gleaming like bones. He didn't sit, yet he just looked at it. The people were gathering outside the gates. Nobles, peasants, spies, rats, all waiting to see what would become of King's Landing. And above them, caged in the black cells, Cersei Lannister watched from behind iron bars, smiling in the dark. "You're becoming just like me," she whispered, to the shadows. The Iron Throne still stood empty, but the realm already knew who ruled. Oberyn Martell didn't crown himself. He didn't need to. His presence filled the Red Keep like wildfire in dry grass, unpredictable, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. Where Tywin Lannister had ruled through fear and order, Oberyn ruled through vengeance and uncertainty. One wrong look, one suspicious whisper, and a man could vanish by morning. In the city below, people started locking their doors earlier. The common folk whispered of the Viper's guards, how they wore no sigil, only red sashes soaked in sand and blood. They didn't take bribes, they didn't negotiate, they just watched, and they remembered. One by one, the remnants of Cersei's allies were dragged into the light, lords who'd hidden their loyalties, septons who'd praised the Lannisters from the pulpit, gold cloaks who had turned their backs on Elia Martell all those years ago. Public trials were held. Most didn't end with words, they ended with heads, but for all his wrath, Oberyn hadn't touched Cersei, not yet. She remained locked beneath. The Red Keep, her cell dark and damp, her hair matted, skin pale as parchment. She spoke only to Jaime, and even then, rarely. Her mind had turned inward. She whispered to herself now about wildfire, about her father, about her son on the Iron Throne, a throne that would never be his, Jaime, once the golden lion of the Ee. Realm now moved through the keep like a shadow. His armor lost its shine, his face lost its pride. He hadn't left the city since Cersei's arrest, and he didn't know if he ever would. Something in him had cracked when Tywin died. Something deeper shattered when he saw his sister fall without a fight. One night he visited Tyrion. "You were right," Jaime said, not looking his brother in the eye. "She would have burned the city to keep it." "She still might," Tyrion muttered, pouring him a drink. "What do you want, Jaime?" Jaime hesitated, then said it. "Take her and leave. Before he decides her fate." Tyrion stared. "You want me to break her out? Me?" "I want you to save her before he turns her death into a symbol." Tyrion didn't answer right away, because deep down, he wasn't sure Cersei deserved saving. But family, real family, didn't ask for reasons, just for help. But plans don't stay quiet in King's Landing. The very next day, one of the sand snakes, Nymeria, came to Oberyn with a dagger in her belt and blood on her sleeve. "They're plotting something," she said. "The brothers, the lion and the imp, in the dungeons." Oberyn stood at the top of the Tower of the Hand, staring over the city. The rain had cleared. The streets below gleamed like polished bones. "Let them plot," he said. "She won't leave this city alive." But even he knew something had shifted. The death of Oberyn had shaken his control. The city didn't fear him. It waited for him to stumble. And now, with tensions rising and rumors swirling, every step he took felt like it echoed down into madness. That night, as Oberyn walked alone through the Hall of Faces, what used to be the Grand Sept, now stripped of statues and turned into a place of quiet reckoning, he heard a sound, a laugh, hollow and cruel. "You think you've won," said a voice behind him. He turned. Cersei stood there, not real, not flesh, a vision or a dream. She was dressed in red, her face painted white like a corpse bride. "You haven't killed me yet," the phantom said, circling him. "Because you want me to see it. You want me to suffer. But every moment you keep me alive, the realm sees your weakness." Oberyn said nothing. "I watched you dance in the gardens, smile, bleed for your lover. And now, you rule the graveyard of kings. Tell me, Viper, do you feel powerful or just alone?" He blinked, and she was gone. He looked down at his hand. It was shaking. At dawn, a new raven arrived from Dorne. Doran Martell's words were short. "End. This, or I will." But Oberyn had gone too far to stop. The city was a blade's edge, and he was the hand holding it, tight enough to bleed. And beneath the red keep, the real Cersei still waited, still smiling. Because she knew one thing, Oberyn didn't. In King's Landing, the longer you chase revenge, the more the city finds a way to eat you alive. By the time the first snowflake fell on King's Landing, a rare chilling omen from the north, the city had turned inward, twisted in fear and bitterness. The Dornish banners still flew, but fewer people looked up at them now. Winter was whispering through the streets, and with it came the rot of old grudges that refused to die. In the cells beneath the Red Keep, Cersei had stopped speaking. She stared through the cracks in the wall, counting days in silence. Not because she was broken, no, Cersei was never truly broken, but because she was waiting. She always had, patience when hatred was involved. Above, in the Tower of the Hand, Tyrion sat hunched over a small table, scrawling out a list, names, places, secrets. He no longer drank for pleasure. It was routine now, survival. The taste of wine kept him, sane in a city spinning off its axis. Then came a knock. It was Jaime. He didn't wait for an invitation. He entered, his face pale and cold. "She won't eat," he said. Tyrion set the quill down. "Is that your way of saying you're ready to let her go?" Jaime hesitated. "She said something strange to me this morning. She asked if wildfire still burned beneath the city." Tyrion went still. "Does it?" Jaime asked. Tyrion's mouth was dry. "Yes, thousands of jars, hidden in vaults Tywin had sealed. Cersei always knew. She just never had the nerve. Not until—" Jaime slammed his fist on the table. "Then we need to stop her before she does something unforgivable." Tyrion gave him a grim smile. "She already has. The difference now is she might take all of us with her." Meanwhile, Oberyn stood in the throne room, facing the Iron Throne with a letter from Sunspear in his hands. Doran Martell's words were growing colder, more forceful. "You have turned a quest for justice into a campaign of blood. Come home, brother, or be declared rogue." He read it twice, then tore it in half. He couldn't go back, not now. Not when the Lannister bloodline still pulsed beneath his feet. The Sand Snakes had grown restless. With Obara gone, Nymeria and Tyene were tightening their grip on the capital. Arrests became commonplace, trials rarer. People vanished. Dorne's soldiers had begun acting less like liberators, more like jailers, and in the taverns they whispered, "The Viper is losing control." That night, Oberyn met Varys in the empty sept. The once great temple was nothing more than scorched stone and broken windows now, its gods toppled and discarded. "She's planning something," Varys said softly. "Something final. And if you don't act soon, your justice will turn into a funeral pyre." "I will not kill her in secret," Oberyn snapped. "She deserves to face judgment. The realm needs to see her fall." Varys raised an eyebrow. "Or it needs to survive. Choose quickly." But Cersei had already made her choice. In the darkness of her cell, she cradled the small vial of wildfire she'd hidden in a seam of her bedding. a smuggled gift delivered by a loyal rat who still believed in the Queen Mother. She knew Oberyn wanted a public reckoning, but she wouldn't give it to him. He wanted screams, tears, shame. Instead, she would give him silence and fire. The plan was simple: one drop on the floor, a spark, and the old tunnels beneath the Red Keep, stuffed with forgotten wildfire caches, would erupt, not all of them, just enough to swallow the tower, to take Oberyn, the snakes, maybe even Tyrion. Let them burn. Let it all burn. But fate intervenes, in strange ways. Myrcella came to her. She had escaped her chamber. She found her mother's cell with the help of a sympathetic guard, one who had once served under Jaime. "Don't do it," she whispered through the bars. "Please, Mother, we can leave. We can go to Essos, or back to the Rock. You don't have to do this." Cersei looked at her daughter, the only part of her she ever loved purely. She reached through the bars and touched her face, cold and trembling. "You are soft," she whispered, "like I once was. It's a curse." "Then break the curse," Myrcella begged. "Please." For a long time, Cersei didn't speak. Then finally she set the vial down. But the fuse had already been lit elsewhere, because while Cersei hesitated, someone else did not. A blast rocked the city just after midnight. One of the old cellars beneath the keep, sealed since Maegor's time, erupted in green fire, lighting up the sky like a second sun. Buildings collapsed, walls cracked. Fire poured like rivers through the alleys. Panic consumed the capital. And in the heart of it all, Oberyn Martell stood on the throne room steps, staring through shattered windows, watching his justice turn to ash. Smoke blanketed King's Landing like a funeral shroud. The sky had turned a sickly shade of green from the wildfire smoke, casting an unnatural hue over everything. Fires still raged in parts of the city, and screams echoed through alleyways long after the initial explosion. Oberyn Martell stood at the edge of the ruined tower, cloak torn, face cut and bloodied. The blast had missed the throne room by a whisper, but much of the Red Keep's lower levels had collapsed. Dozens were dead. Soldiers, servants, even innocents who had taken shelter behind its walls. The Iron Throne remained intact, mocking him with its jagged smile. Tyene and Nymeria had survived, though barely. Tyene's arm had been burned badly, her usual sharp tongue replaced with silent, pained glances. Nymeria moved like a shadow now, quieter than ever before. "She did it," Tyene whispered. "That witch finally did it." But Oberyn wasn't sure. It didn't feel like Cersei's fire, not exactly. Too precise, too surgical. The blast had taken out the archive wing, the war rooms beneath the keep, and the secret passageways Tywin once used. It felt more like a message than an assassination, and the message was simple. "You're not safe, not even here." He turned to Tyrion, who arrived limping, covered in soot, coughing from the smoke. "She didn't do this," Tyrion said, his voice raspy. "She might have wanted to. Gods know she's capable. But this was someone else." Oberyn narrowed his eyes. "Who?" Tyrion looked grim. "Someone who knows where every wildfire jar is buried. Someone who wants you to think you're in control, right until you burn." "Varys?" The thought hit them both at once. That night the whispers came like rats fleeing a flood. Varys was gone. Disappeared. No trail, no guards, no explanation. Just a single message left on the table in his chambers, written in clean, fluid ink. "King's Landing will never belong to one man's vengeance. Let it bleed if it must, but it will never kneel to the spear." The people panicked. The explosion shattered what little order remained. The Dornish garrison tried to control the crowds, but suspicion turned the city against them. Foreign invaders. Murderers of the crown, bringers of fire. Stones were thrown. A sand snake patrol was ambushed and left hanging from a gate. Even the gold cloaks began wavering, some abandoning posts, others whispering about restoring the Baratheon name. Power was bleeding from Oberyn's hands, and he could feel it. In the darkness of Maegor's holdfast, Cersei smiled. Not because she'd won, but because he was finally losing. Jaime had stayed by her side ever since the blast. He hadn't run. He hadn't begged. He just stood in the shadows, watching the woman he loved sink deeper into madness. She wanted it all to burn, Jaime said aloud, looking at her through the cell bars. She still does. Cersei didn't answer. Instead, she turned and said, "Tell me, Jaime, when this is over, and they're all dead, will you carry my ashes to the rock?" He didn't know what to say, because part of him wanted to say, yes, and another part wanted to walk away and never look back. Outside in the Great Sept's ruins, Oberyn called a council. What remained of the city's leaders, what few nobles hadn't fled or burned, gathered in the wind and smoke. "I came here for justice," Oberyn said, his voice loud, cracking through the air. "For Elia, for her children, for the realm we all betrayed." He pointed toward the fire-scarred horizon. "And now I see. This city cannot be ruled. Can only be survived." A silence followed. Then a voice broke it. "You took the throne without claiming it, and now it consumes you like it did the rest." It was Olenna Tyrell, old and cloaked in black. "You should have killed her when you had the chance. Now she'll be a martyr, or worse, a symbol." Oberyn met her gaze. "And what would you have done?" She smiled bitterly. "Poisoned the wine. Quiet, clean, effective." Later that night, Oberyn stood in front of Cersei's cell. She rose slowly, eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "Come to kill me at last?" "No," he said. "I've decided you don't get to die yet." Cersei tilted her head. How merciful. Oberyn stepped closer, voice calm but icy. "You will watch this city choke. You will hear them cry out for mercy. And when they spit your name in disgust, you'll know. This is your legacy." Cersei smiled faintly. "Then I've already won." The Viper walked away, but something had changed in his steps. Not vengeance, not justice, resignation. Because now he knew the truth of King's Landing. No matter who claimed it, it always consumed its kings. The final dawn came without birdsong. Ash drifted through the air like snow, blanketing the ruined rooftops and silent alleys of King's Landing. The fires had gone out, but the smoke remained, lingering like a curse over a city that had finally cracked beyond repair. Inside the throne room, the stained glass windows were gone, shattered in the wildfire blast. The air stank of scorched stone and melted iron. The Iron Throne, jagged and glinting with the first light, looked more like a trap than a seat of power. Oberyn Martell stood before it, alone. He had aged 10 years in 10 weeks. His eyes, once burning with fire, were now hollow. His once proud stance now weighed down by the corpses of everything he thought justice would save. Dawn had sent him to avenge Elia. He had killed the Mountain, broken the Lion's pride, and torn out the heart of the Lannister Empire. But in doing so, he had become a symbol of something even darker. "Justice is a fire," he whispered to the cold steel, "and I mistook it for light." Behind him, Tyrion entered quietly, his limp more pronounced than ever. He didn't speak for a while. He just looked at the throne, the room, the man who had become the Viper King of Ashes. "They're calling you a tyrant now," Tyrion said finally. "The same people who cheered when you marched through the gates." "I know," Oberyn said softly. "Do you care?" Oberyn turned, his head slightly. "I didn't come here to be loved, but I also didn't come here to become this." Tyrion nodded. "You came for vengeance, and you found what every man who seeks it eventually does." "And what's that?" "A grave you start by digging for someone else." In the dungeon, Cersei sat upright for once. She had refused food for 3 days, but today she was dressed in what little remained of her royal garb. Not out of pride, but out of readiness. She knew what was coming. She had made her peace with it. Jaime stood at her cell door, his golden hand clenched. His eyes were rimmed with red. "This is the end, isn't it?" she asked, her voice even. "It should have been long ago," Jaime said. "But you stayed." He didn't respond. And when the guards came, Cersei didn't flinch. The execution was quiet. No crowd, no spectacle. Only a handful of lords, the Martell daughters. Tyrion and a silent Oberyn watched as Cersei Lannister was brought to the steps of the Great Sept's ruins, the same place where she once had a man's tongue ripped out, for gossip. She looked up at the sky, not at the men around her. "I die a queen," she said to no one in particular. Oberyn stepped forward, blade in hand. "You die as Elia did, powerless, alone." Her eyes flicked to his, and for a brief moment the fire returned. "Then I take comfort knowing this city will do the same to you." And with a single motion, it was done. The viper had struck one last time, but there was no cheer, no roar of the crowd. Only wind, only silence. Cersei's body was buried in the crypts beneath the Red Keep, far from her father, far from her children, far from any legacy worth remembering. And Oberyn? He vanished. Some said he returned to Dorne, broken and bitter. Others whispered he boarded a ship to Essos, never to be seen again. The Sand Snake stayed behind, ruling for a while in his name, but the city never accepted them. The scars were too deep. Tyrion stayed, not to rule, but to watch. To be the last Lannister standing in the ruins of everything his family built and destroyed. King's Landing never recovered. It wore its burns like armor and its silence like a crown. The Iron Throne stood untouched for years. No kings, no queens, just echoes. In the end, the Viper had his justice. But King's Landing had the last word. It always did.